Thank you. Good morning, everyone. That was quite a mouthful. So just to give a little bit on my background that I did not quite include, and I just give you a little perspective on where I come from. So I've been in industry working for pharmaceuticals all my life. So about 3 years back, a little less than 3 years back, I shifted more to academic organization to understand more in terms of informatics. What's the bleeding edge in terms of the informatics in healthcare and health data discovery. So in pharmaceuticals, I've been working more with the enterprise innovation systems, which facilitate clinical trials and clinical data management. So here I wanted to work more with the research data. So that's a little bit of the gist. So I don't know if everyone here knows what Harvard Catalyst is. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about, everybody knows Harvard University and Harvard Medical School. So Harvard Catalyst, it actually stands for Clinical and Translational Science Center. And I think you are pretty much familiar with translational science. And if there's anybody who doesn't know, let me know and I will give you a little brief about it. So it's primarily getting the basic research to the point of care. So that's what translational science is. And to facilitate that, the NIH, which is National Institute of Health, a government body in US, funded this organization to create opportunities for researchers to basically create research which does this paradigm shift, and also to allow for their training, allow for informatics, and also allow for research resources. So my group, which is the Harvard Catalyst Informatics Group, primarily deals with building applications to facilitate all of these objectives for Harvard Catalyst. There are different CTSAs across US, and Harvard Catalyst is one of them. So the problems in clinical trials, a problem in research today is that we have a lot of patient data, really, and it's all buried in electronic health records. But the problem is accessing this data and understanding what this data is. It's, we can call it EHR, but it's actually a distributed system across the hospitals. It could be data which is sitting in the labs. It could be data that's in patients' discharge summaries. It could be observation tables. It could be in the payers' claims data. So how you connect all the data and understand the patient in entirety, and you need that. When you write a clinical trial protocol to register patients for that clinical trial protocols, you need to know which patients are within those inclusion-exclusion criteria, which patients to include and which patients to exclude from the trial. So it's not very easy to get that data, even within the hospital, because it's in different systems. And now we're talking about multiple hospitals, multiple sites, so large clinical trials go across. So we've seen that you have these beautifully designed protocols, but they sit because we don't have enough patients to recruit those trials, which means, a lot of money that goes down the pipeline to actually support those clinical trials. There's also not a lot of semantic interoperability. It's a big word, but basically what it means is that it's not one common language that this data speaks in. Everybody uses their own standards or doesn't use the standard, but it's all across. So how do you bring all of the information under one umbrella of semantic interoperability? Then the data elements, you could have a table, think of like 300 different columns in that table. Not every hospital would collect all those 300 data because they would collect the data that's most important or relevant to that organization, which means, again, when you're collecting the data, you don't really get a full representation of what's out there. And then the most important part I would almost put here, which is more than your technology question, it is actually the question of HIPAA, of patient privacy, of governance, of regulatory agencies and policies that the hospitals are under, which means how to surface the data without compromising those HIPAA principles and compromising patients. For example, just to give example, a use case, you want to know how many HIV patients are in a particular hospital, so that would be compromising the HIPAA for that. So the impact of this problem is multifold, and it actually progresses across the arrow that's shown on the screen. So starting with the arrow on the extreme right, so difficulty in finding those large clinical trials. And it's not only large, but also the rare. So you want to get that needle in the haystack. That particular patient, it could be maybe 5 or 10 patients that would be more pertinent for that rare disease. So how do you find them in billions of data points that you have across hospitals, which makes the clinical trials start delayed, delay means expense, which means resources and time and money. And even when you are doing the trials with a subset of patients, maybe like a narrower patient set, there's a question about the validity of trials, and that, when you bring the trial results in front of FDA, you have to give an unbiased approach. And also, the ability to extrapolate then results to a general population is difficult. So that's why you need to have a wide patient set which is representative of that disease. So as a result, what happens sometimes, the trials are stopped prematurely because they're not properly recruited, or sometimes it just prevents them from starting at all. And I've seen this a lot of times in pharmaceuticals, good clinical trials, just not enough patient recruitment. So in that paradigm, we started this project called Shrine, and it's a shared health research network query tool. And so Shrine was funded way back in 2008 to actually bring hospitals, which was starting with Harvard. Harvard has about 15 plus hospitals. So let's start at the home, bring all these hospital data in a queryable tool in which you could actually, it would be web-based, so it's agnostic of the platform. And when we talked about the user-defined query, how many data elements are captured, now you give the user the ability to pick the data that they need to actually pick across the hospitals. And what it returns, now this is the third point, actually talks to the patient privacy. It does not give you patient names, patient identifications. All it gives you is an aggregate count. So for example, it says, if you give 3 or 4 criteria, it says, well, you have 20 patients in hospital 1, you have 30 patients in hospital 2, you have 5 patients in hospital 3. So that's all you get. So which gives you an idea about the feasibility of the study, that yes, I can do the study, I know there are X number of patients, and we could, this trial could go forward. And then you go through the IRB policies and actually get to those patients and then contact those patients for enrollment. So that's like the step after that. But first, that hospital has so many patients, and it's worth your while to go for that route. Shrine is based on ontology, which is standardized nomenclature, and I'll talk a little deeply about ontology, what kind of codes and are used in the background. And it's based on open source I2B2 platform. So I2B2 is a very popular data warehousing platform that's used across more than about 120, I just don't even have the right number. They keep on changing, and it's fast-growing EMR data warehouse. So it builds on top of the I2B2 warehouse that's already installed at the hospital, so nothing new. But if the hospital doesn't have and the site doesn't have, an I2B2 installation is done. And then I2B2 installation, after it's done, then the mapping is done for the data elements from I2B2 to Shrine, so they talk. And this actually takes care of different I2B2 installations at different hospitals, which could match what the hospitals need. But then for the Shrine, the mapping is done on top of that. It's a federated architecture, so the word federated means that all the data is primarily at the sites, which means you are not bringing in any data. So data stays locally, the control is local, the governance policies are local. All you are given is login and access. And on top of this, the Shrine query runs and executes the query that the user or the researcher starts. So as I said, Shrine is a shared health research information network. So based on the features that I just spoke to you about, what does it do? It allows investigators to query your electronic medical record data across network of hospitals, not just one, but network of hospitals. It's a web application, which means you can run real-time queries. Patient data gets uploaded every day, every hour, and then which means you have, at that particular point, the most relevant, current, updated information. And that could, just getting to a data, some of you must have experience to get the data from the hospitals. By the time you get the data, it's already a week or month old. So this is, a lot of control on most current data. There's a data protection architecture. Just by running the aggregate queries, you already have removed a lot of, HIPAA compliance. You have put HIPAA compliance in place in terms of just giving aggregates and not disclosing any patient data. And also it's behind the firewalls. And It's an extension of the popular I2B2 data warehouse platform, so using standardized data warehouse. It's an expandable network because it's a federated. All you need is another site to come up and be part of the Shrine network, and we can start. And the software is absolutely open source, which means today you could just go to the site, download the software, and try to work through that. It's actually called under the BSD licenses, so BSD3 license. So this is a screenshot. I don't expect you to read the whole screenshot, but maybe I can point a little bit to give you a flavor of how the Shrine web client tool works. So up here is, as you can see, it's under Shrine. You have different categories. So first, as you can see, is demographics. So a person would actually search from demographics what exactly patient cohort they're looking for. So these are the 3 columns. You can think of as like 3 criteria for search. And it's an AND query, as you can see. So the first, so the person actually is searching for a Black or Hispanic, a Black or African American, right here, and it's a male. And then the second part of the query is a diagnosis from here. So diagnosis is hypertension. So you want African American male who has hypertension, and then query has been executed over here. It says run query, and as you can see, first, the execution time is in terms of seconds. That actually tells you how many results were produced in so many seconds. And these are the 4 different Harvard hospitals. So the first one is a Partners Hospital, then is the Boston Children's Hospital, then the BIDMC, which is Beth Israel, and then the Dana-Farber. So in the 4 hospitals, you see the number of queries are to the order of about 232,000 patients, plus minus 3. And in Children's Hospital, you have about 9,300 patients. In BIDMC, you have 67,000 patients. And the Dana-Farber, which is a smaller hospital, you have about 7,967. So just to give you a flavor of how quickly you were able to run a query, given some very small parameters, indices, and you were able to complete the query and get your results at your fingertip. And then people run more complex queries, more ANDs, and then you can have different results. The other thing about this, we call this Shrine web client, is ability to go to your past or previous query, so you don't necessarily need to run every query every time. So for example, if you run a query in the past, it's by the date, and this is your client view, and you can go there and click, and you'll get similar results, or whatever the results of those queries were. So for the technical-minded here, I included a high-level architecture diagram just to show you a brief flavor of how that works. So a Shrine user, any researcher, we saw this, a Shrine web client just now in the previous picture. So he goes to client, it puts in the query. So query then routes through the I2B2 PM cell, right? So we call Shrine query entry point. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know if it's time for a question, if I can make a question or...
Yes, absolutely. You can stop me anytime. Please go ahead.
Did the system can produce automatic generated queries? For example, I understand that at least I used to work in a company that auto-generate queries or optimize query basically develop. In order to say, to create 2 times the same query, or queries that basically are based on, to say an example, typos or any type of error that basically is systematic, so that basically be automatically generated. I don't know if that...
Okay, so I think your question was almost 2-part, and the question I'll repeat for people who couldn't hear. So one was, is the ability to generate automatic queries that could run on its own, and those query could be like a data quality query to check for typos and stuff like that. So the business need for that would be data quality. So I think what I did not mention here is that there is another governance piece in the query. Once you design the query, it's called DSA, which is data steward role. So data steward role is primarily either at every hospital, which is decentralized model, or it could be central data steward. So that person actually has the ability to first look at the query, approve the topic, and then the person gets the access and they could run the query. Because again, as I said, there is a lot of misuse that could happen with people could run multiple queries, very complex queries, and get to the exact patient they're looking for, and that way there could be some breach of patient privacy. So that's why it is to actually stop that kind of behavior for people to run. That's why you have, data is protected against under firewalls. So data steward is a role that we have defined who actually approves the query topic. So based on that query would probably, that's why we don't have functionality of automatic running, because we do that. So what we have seen recently in a bigger, larger network is that we have a data stored app, or DSA, which is automatic approval. Because it's a lot of burden on the person to actually approve each and every one. So we have an automatic approval, but then they can go back and check periodically and see which queries were run by who and what the topics were. So that's just to keep that governance in place, to give them control over somebody's malbehavior, or and to maybe block their access, things like that. So for that particular reason, we don't have any automatic data query runs. And the second is for the data quality, it's more for the local. So if whatever is at the source is good, garbage in, garbage out. So if at the source, if the data is well curated, clean, and well collected, then you will have the results also that are clean and well collected. So that's why when we do the mappings, at that time we are actually checking if they are in the right order, or they're collected well, or they are under the data specifications. So I think that point it's done. But it's a valid point later on to check for data sanctity. Those could be queries, but I still see them being done more locally than the network-wide. Any other questions? So going back to this diagram, so Shrine web client executes the query, and then you run the query. All the queries go to Shrine query entry point, and at that place it's consolidated, and then it's routed to the Shrine hub. So it's a hub and spoke model. If you're familiar with that architecture, you have a central hub, and these are the spokes. So these are the local. Think of this as hospital A, hospital B, hospital C. And all of those have Shrine adapters. Now, Shrine adapter is what does the translation. Remember I talked about ontology, or the taxonomy, and semantic interoperability? This is where the language transfer happens, where Shrine language is translated with I2B2 mapping over there, and so the query is transformed, and the results are captured by the adapter. And then the results, all of them reside over here in Shrine Hub, and go back to the query entry point, which again, when you saw the results executed, they come back to the Shrine web client. So the process goes this ways, and then back to the Shrine web client. So a little bit more details. So we saw the 4 pieces: web client, this query entry point, the hub, and adapter. So web client, we saw, what does it do? Browse the query history. We saw the old history over there. It navigates the network ontology. So when I said navigate on network ontology, let me go back. So right here. So you can actually navigate through all of this. So you can actually see all the terms. You can expand them and go back. So you can navigate that. Then it formulates and executes query, which we saw an example of how query is executed. The next is query entry point, so which actually authenticates all incoming requests. That's where the governance piece I was talking about, to make sure it's the right person is doing it, and it's the right topic. Then it forwards the request to the hub. Hub collects the results back into the single response for a user. And then over here, what it does is hub broadcasts a request from QEP to all the adapters. This is when you've started the query. And then it also broadcasts, and it also collects the results into a result buffer. And then going again, granular, all the way to the I2B2 and the Shrine adapter, translates the Shrine network terms into local I2B2 terms. So this translation is the most important. This is the part that's missing today when we go to EHRs and try to get information. And also over there, it will contact I2B2 to service the request. Sometimes you have to wait. I2B2 is down, so it will keep on pinging it and checking, are you up, kind of a messaging. And then we'll return the results and the status to the hub. Any questions? So the ontology is a big piece, which is how exactly are they speaking? What is the standardized vocabularies they are using? So it's specific to each network. This is very important because there are various Shrine networks today. There's a Shrine network at Harvard Medical School. There's a Shrine network at other institutions in California, and I'll go through them. So whatever ontology is selected is for that network. It's like a decision of this is how we will represent our information. And it's also based on data elements collected within the EMRs, electronic medical records. And the vocabularies used for these data elements. So these are actually the tables. Remember I showed you demographics table? And I also showed you one diagnosis table in which we picked up hypertension. So besides that, there are vital signs, there are encounters, there are lab tests, and there are medications and procedures. So for each of these, there are standardized vocabularies. We are currently in the process of moving from ICD-9 to ICD-10. So now I will talk about a network. So the beauty of Shrine is it's a network agnostic query tool, which means you can put in 7 or 8 different hospitals, build a network, build an ontology, and off you go. And then, it's basically researchers within that network can share the information. So there are 4 different networks today, and I've heard there are probably some more that I'm not aware of, but these are the ones that are currently we are aware of. One is the Harvard Medical School HMS network. Then there is UC Rex, which is California hospitals. There's PCORI, Skills, and ACT. And for each of these, so Shrine HMS network is hospitals of BIDMC, Beth Israel, MGH, Mass General Hospital, Dana-Farber, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital. So all these 5 hospitals are Harvard and Harvard-affiliated and Partners Hospital. And just an example of Harvard Shrine Network, there are about 6 million patients' data that's behind this network, 1 billion facts, and 18,000 terms. So, if you were to get access to this information at your fingertips, I think that's like real gold. The other networks are PCORI Skills Network, again, independent ontology that they are using, and these are all different hospitals, and this is not an exhaustive list. I've heard there are others also that have recently joined. And one thing I wanted to mention here, same hospital could be in multiple networks. That's very important. You see Beth Israel Hospital is here as well. Boston Children's is here as well. So hospital could choose to participate in different networks because, networks come together because of either they are all rally around one particular diagnosis or therapeutic area, or they could be for other reasons. So that's why it's, they have patients for all broad spectrum. So they could be part of different networks. And this is the UC Rex network. It's all university, UCSF, UCLA, UCD, UCSD, and so UC Irvine. So this is the latest one. This is NIH funded by NCATS. It's called Accrual of Patients to Clinical Trials Network. You might have heard about it. It's ACT network. It has a very ambitious goal of building at one point maybe 30 different hospitals in one network. So currently participating sites are 21 hospitals. And the goal is to enable and rapidly identify patients primarily for accrual of clinical trials. And the success will be actually some of the clinical trials get patient recruitment through this. So I just have an animated US map of different networks here. So the yellow ones are ACT and NCATS. As you can see, that's like the biggest population of sites. And then over here are the West Coast hospitals, California, and then Harvard up here. And then we have PCORI Skills, which is all over the map again. So the value of Shrine Network primarily is in terms of identifying potential clinical trial cohorts for recruitment, generating new research hypotheses because it gives you ability to look across what kind of population set you have, and planning for research requiring large sample sizes, but I would also add here also for rare diseases. And we have seen that junior researchers are trying to prepare for grant applications. They would like to say that their trial or their research will be successful because they know they have so many patients in that hospital. So a lot of people use Shrine to actually identify patient cohorts, which gets them a successful grant. So there are some useful links. You can go to open.med, harvard.edu, Project Shrine, and find out more about the project and the team. And you could also participate in our open source community, which is in terms of technology and software. I know I wanted to say, if you have any questions, stop me, but I'll be happy to take any questions at this point. Okay, thank you very much for your time.